Alright, guys, let's kick this off right. I'm Dan the Platinum Man, here to see how many games can be platinumed before leaving the PS Plus service, along with some personal takes on the game and a rating. I'll be working on 3 games for this month: Scarlet Nexus, Outriders, and the Outer Worlds Spacers Edition. So let's kick things off with Scarlet Nexus. Scarlet Nexus is an action RPG combined with elements of a visual novel, brought to us by Bandai Namco and Tosei. The game is a fantastical sci-fi romp taking us across a ruined and mildly dystopian Earth as a member of the OSF in order to protect humanity from the Others, mutated alien-like creatures bent on eating human brains. You fight the Others using your basic fare of anime sci-fi weapons, aka futuristic versions of mostly medieval weapons, and your natural psychic abilities. Every main and side character has a psychic ability, with the 2 protagonists' ability overlapping, and the 8 main supporting cast with unique abilities. Each team also has a handler character, a telepathic psionic, who mainly just serves as a story device to provide instant information. The first few chapters will have your party rotate between members to familiarize you with the psychic options for combat, before settling into the main divide of 5 main squad mates, your main character, and the 4 combat support roles. After Chapter 9, the teams will merge, instantly doubling your psychic combat options. The game is separated into 12 chapters, with a standby phase coming after each chapter by returning to your hideout or base. Standby phases let you have some downtime with your party members and adds the visual novel-like element of spending personal time with them. The visual novelness comes from the presentation and a lot of dialogue. However, during the story and all of the scenes, you really don't have any choice, as the scenes simply play out with preset dialogue. As such, you, the player, don't exactly have much agency in how the story unfolds. You are very much along for the ride. The game feels a lot like Bandai's other series, the Tales of games, where even though player choice is limited or non existent, it allows for strong character arcs and character growth. Now, let's get started on the trophies. PSN Profiles, the guide I used for this game and will be using for future games, with links in the description, rates the game as a 2 out of 10 difficulty, requiring 2 playthroughs, approximately 60 hours of playtime, and has 53 total trophies to earn. The game has surprisingly few story-related trophies, with the bulk of the trophies being earned either from combat particulars or from the visual novel episodes with the supporting cast. The game is also kinda weird for its trophy spread. During the first playthrough, you will get many trophies due to either being first time uses or general accumulation through gameplay. You'll get the last trophy for the first playthrough from beating the game, and then during the second playthrough, majority of the remaining trophies will be unlocked, but only during the tail end of the campaign. This will be around chapter 11 or 12, depending on what you do for social stuff. There are no difficulty related trophies, so you can play through on any difficulty. However, there seems to be some confusion on whether difficulty affects the experience gained. I tested this on easy, normal, and hard, and personally saw no difference in the amount of experience earned. I also played the game on normal for both playthroughs. The game does mandate a playthrough for each protagonist, and for the initial story beats and up to about the midpoint, it's very worth it to experience the wildly different stories. However, during the last few chapters with the teams merged, the story scenes are practically verbatim, save for 2 or 3 lines of dialogue, so the game loses its speed during the second playthrough. You'll get the majority of the endgame trophies during Standby Phase 12. I'll keep the explanations mostly spoiler free, so let's dive in. The first trophy you'll get is from completing the prologue, i.e., the tutorial. I chose to play as Yuito for the first playthrough. My second trophy earned was from throwing 100 items with psychokinesis, followed by using the item exchange for the first time. The next trophy I got was from using Brain Crush 20 times. Brain Crush, also known as Mind Haxers to only me, is the game's finisher for breaking the enemies, allowing for instant kills or dealing large damage to bosses while also guaranteeing an item drop. Most bosses will also need to be brain crushed to be fully defeated, with the crush coming from either depleting the health gauge 100% or the crush gauge. You can shorten a boss fight by getting them into brain crush range, usually, and which will then do usually about 10 to 15% of their health damage, then using the crush when prompted. Next is the trophy for being revived by another character. This will sometimes happen when your character's health hits 0 and will prevent a game over. It happens a lot from overexpending or some of the cheap boss attacks. Gifts is the first related trophy regarding gifts that you can unlock during your next standby phase. Gifts are items that increase affection to help increase bond levels with the support members, and are cool as an aesthetic, because every gift that you give to your teammates adds something to the hideout, with several members actively using what you give them. It's a nice little bit of world building. Trusted Ally was what I got next. This happens from the first time a Guardian Vision activates. Visions will activate at random to protect your character from taking damage from any character that has reached level 2 in bond level. If this hasn't activated by the time you beat the game, you're either unloved by your team or are just a god at not getting hit or taking damage. The next trophy you'll probably get is Wheels Gone Wild. Certain environments have special psychokinesis objects that let you ride them, piloting them to run over enemies. On the Kunad Highway, this is gotten from using a bus to kill at least 5 enemies with a single bus. This is very easy to do as there are multiple buses and many enemies. Make sure you run them over, as the finisher doesn't seem to work for this trophy. Next trophy I got was Fashion Debut. You get this simply by changing or adding a cosmetic attachment. Easy. The next trophy is story related, regarding what is known as the Suo incident. This will be earned during Yurito Standby Phase 4 or Kasane Standby Phase 5. The trophy will pop basically after the cutscene once you're on the loading screen, loading into your hideout. My next combat trophy was for Power of Observation, which is earned for performing 20 perfect dodges. This will probably come naturally from dodging attacks, and can be made easier by using Tsugumi's Clairvoyance ability, which increases the dodge window. As such, it can be earned more easily in Yuito's story, as Tsugumi is with you more often. You will have Tsugumi with you basically from Chapter 4 onwards in Yuito's campaign, whereas you will have Tsugumi for a brief period in an early chapter of Kasane's playthrough, and won't really have her as a member of your team until Chapter 9. Technically the standby phase of 9. The next trophy earned was You Are Not Alone. This is earned from having the brain field time extended and the stun removed. Use the field and have higher bomb levels. Very easy. The brain field is this game's version of hyper mode, or your super moves. This can only be used when you have filled up a proper gauge. You activate it by clicking both sticks, L3 and R3, and you enter a super mode with a strict time limit. This can help greatly for defeating bosses or many waves of enemies, and will even give you bonus at EXP if you can get the multiplier high enough. The higher your bonds with your friends, the more likely that they are to help you, increasing the time and reducing the random stun that you will sometimes get in the brain field, which is a result of having too much power. Next trophy earned was the Place Beyond the Pain. You get this from using the SAS system 100 times. SAS is the system that allows your main character to borrow the psychic abilities of your teammates. This will happen naturally during gameplay. You can get it earlier by activating and deactivating the SAS abilities, but if you don't need to focus on it because it's only 100 times, which will definitely happen before you beat the game the first time, let alone the second time, unless you're actively avoiding using that system. This comes naturally from dungeon combat and dungeon exploration, especially with Yuito needing to use Luca's teleport for traversal. Another cumulative combat trophy is Seasoned Psychokinesis User for using 50 successful special object follow-up attacks. This isn't from using 50 unique items, thankfully. It's from using the L2 psychokinesis objects and then successfully performing the quick time actions. Once again, this will probably be gotten very naturally. Then we can get the Brain Field Expert, which is achieved for getting a 1.80 EXP bonus. This can only be achieved within the Brain Field, either from defeating 8 enemies or by using the Brain Drive to get to the multiplier to 1.5, then beating 3 enemies within the Brain Field. This is very easy during enemy waves, and this is especially easy to do in the final dungeon. Knowledge of the Past is the only trophy for field collectibles. This is earned during Yuito's Phase 5. During the return visit to the hospital dungeon, there will be 10 yellow item pickups. These are partially hidden. The next combat trophy is only going to be available to you when you have access to at least 4 SAS members with at least a bond level of 3. Power of Nexus comes from using 4 different combo visions in a single combo. The attacks need to hit the enemy, and this is easily done consecutively. To perform the action, you hold L1 and hit the corresponding face button for the SAS member you'd like to use. With Yuito, this is done very early on, and the ideal order for me, anyway, was using Sugumi, Gemma, Luca, and then Hanabi, although you could potentially swap Hanabi and Luca. Sugumi starts with the long-range pistol shots, then Gemma charges to close the distance. Luca works specifically at close range, and then Hanabi has an area effect attack that is close range. You can also do this with Kasane or when the teams merge, but I found it easier with Yuito and was obtained way earlier than the team merge. Receiver of Protection comes from using Assault Visions 20 times. These are used from performing combos like natural until you get a prompt to hit triangle and circle. This option will only become available for you if you have members of your party that are bond level 4 or higher. There are also late skills in the brain map that will allow you to perform these visions consecutively. Once again, this should be obtained pretty naturally throughout your gameplay. Just it's slightly delayed because you have to have teammates at level 4 or higher in the bond. Next trophy got was Lost in Madness. This is a trophy that will probably not be obtained naturally because it's obtained from running out of time in the brain field. However, this description is slightly misleading, as it's obtained not when the timer runs out and your character can't move. It's obtained from when the secondary timer to cancel the brain field runs out. In my experience, this always results in a game over. I could never get revived. As this is an intentional game over, it feels unnatural to get this trophy, given that you have about 15 seconds to cancel the field before the game ends you. The next and only other unnatural trophy in this game comes from Cunning Brain Smash. This comes from brain crushing 3 enemies at the same time. Normally, throughout the game, I could get 2 enemies at the same time to be in brain crush state, but not usually 3. Easiest place to do this is in the Hano Mountain Path with the L2 Billboard Surfboard. You need to get 3 of the Rainy Rummy enemies close together, and then use L2 Finish while on the Billboard Surfboard to break all 3 enemies. You then have to make sure that they all have the light bulb coming out of their bodies in order to use the Brain Crush, and that all 3 of your enemies have to be in your field of view. The next story trophy is One Wheel, which will happen when the teams unite during Standby Phase 9. Happens naturally, nothing to it. It was at this point in the game that I remembered that the game has side quests. There are 68 total side quests in the game, 34 for each protagonist, with 29 being available by the end of the game, with 5 being locked to the post game for each protagonist. These are tracked together and are needed for 2 trophies. You will get 1 trophy for completing the first side quest, and then another trophy for completing 30 overall. Completing certain thresholds will also reward you with large amounts of experience from the challenge menu. And these side quests are very easy. Some of them range from offering certain items in your inventory to killing enemies in certain ways or certain manners. Some of them can be annoying, as you may not have unlocked the skill necessary to defeat enemies. For example, the psychokinesis finisher on certain enemies is a part of the brain map that you will unlock kind of late on, and I had actually completely overlooked it the first time playing. So there were a couple of quests that I simply could not do at the time because I did not have the ability required to defeat them. But just keep it in mind, you can do 15 with Yuito and then 15 with Kasane, and you'll get the trophy for 30. Or you can be like me, where I did about 25 quests as Yuito, and then finish the rest with early quests from Kasane to get the trophy. The next trophy you're going to get is for the expanded brain functionality. This is really easy. You have to complete one of the branches of the brain map, which is this game's version of the skill tree. Now, I personally made some kind of poor choices, and I probably could have gotten this way earlier. Obviously, this also can lead into the grind of getting your character up to level 80. Shortly after I got that trophy I got the trophy for Kin's Millionaire, which is obtained for obtaining 200,000 Kins, which is this game's currency. This will probably happen naturally without you needing to sell anything, and you'll get Kins from defeating enemies, so you don't really need to focus on it. It'll happen naturally. The next trophy I got was the Master of the Psionic Space. This is obtained from defeating 50 enemies within your brain field. This is cumulative. It is not all at once. I don't know if there's actually any waves in the game that have you fight 50 enemies at a time. So as long as you're actively using the brain field when you get the chance, you will have this on your first playthrough, if not your second. Very easy. The next item is a cumulative trophy called Collection Freak. This is earned for exchanging 100 items in the item shop. This is very easy for leveling up your team's weapon, as one of the exchanges has the requirement of certain enemy materials and the previous weapon, and then you can trade it up. So you will be able to trade from starter weapon to starter weapon 2 to starter weapon 3 to starter weapon 4 consecutively as you're playing through the game for each of the characters. This will allow you to get marginally stronger, as weapons are one of the few equipments you can actually equip. This is also the only space that you're allowed to purchase gifts for your teammates, being the exchange shop. You can get gifts given to you from completing side quests or from certain Bond episodes. However, they're kind of unreliable, and you're going to need all of the gifts from the shop anyway in order for other trophies later down the line. The exchange shop is also the only place where you're able to get the Baki heads, a cosmetic item that is used for another trophy, and several cosmetic items are not for sale for purchase. You have to exchange for them. So you don't really need to focus on it. You can just get the gifts and then end with the cosmetics once you're towards the end game and have a lot of enemy items. And you have to make sure that when you're trading cosmetics, to focus on getting the Baki heads first. Companionships to the next trophy you're going to get pretty easily. This is simply from getting a single ally to the final Bond level, which is level 6.
When I
Easy.
see you working so hard, it makes me want to work hard too.
The next trophy you're probably going to get is from equipping the entire team with Baki heads. There are 10 heads, and they are all different colors. You're only able to get one of each Baki head from the exchange shop. So you will know when you're able to get the trophy once you have all 10. Once you equip the final one on your teammate in the equipment menu, the trophy will pop. Of course, after I did this, I immediately unequipped it because I did not like the Baki head. Aligned Beyond Time is the only character-specific Bond trophy that we can even get on the first playthrough. This is because, for some ridiculous, stupid reason, every other character Bond beyond the co-protagonist require you to see all of their Bond episodes with both characters. This is 5 episodes for the core members of Team Yuito and 4 episodes for the Team Kasane members with when you're playing as Yuito, and reversed for Kasane's playthrough. And of course, both Yuito and Kasane have 5 episodes with the other protagonist. Yeah, I don't know what they were thinking locking the trophy. It should have been either or as opposed to and. But whatever. It is what it is. The next trophy I got was Mighty Soldier, which is earned for beating 1,000 enemies. This is very easy, will probably happen naturally, you won't need to grind for it, although I will say it's more likely to pop on your second playthrough. The next trophy I got was Friendship, and this one's a little tricky. It requires you to have teammates deployed into combat with you as party members. You will need to revive your teammates 5 times. In order to kill off your teammates easily, you can achieve this by fighting the enemy known as the Augur Sabat. These enemies have an area of effect damaging attack that affects anyone standing on the ground during it. So if you don't kill the enemy and just make sure your teammates are standing in the pool of damage, they will eventually fall and you will have easy time to go over and revive them. You only need to revive teammates 5 times, and this is 5 times cumulative. It's not 5 different revives on different characters. The next trophy is a little bit of a grind, known as Fashionista. You will need 100 cosmetic items, not including add-ons from DLCs. This will be achieved by a combination of purchases, exchange, some gifts, item pickups, and even quest completion rewards. You will only need to collect them. You do not need to equip them. You can also sell them afterwards for money, as there is a challenge for getting 1 million kilns that allows a ton of XP. Tightly Wound Bond is for achieving Bond level 6 with all allies. This only seems to be achievable truly at Standby Phase 12 or within the post-game, or at least after Standby Phase 9 when the teams merge. The next trophy is for the All the Gifts trophy, and this is also keeping in mind with the All the Gifts trophy, 1 level 6 bond is required with each protagonist. So for Yuito will have to have level 6 with at least one character, and Kasane will have to have at least 1 level 6 bond with another character. It can be the same one, but there's a unique gift that you will only give when you're at level 6. Finally, wrapping up Yuito's storyline, we'll get 2 trophies in a sequence. You will get 1 trophy for defeating the final boss, and then after viewing the epilogue, you will receive your next trophy. At this point, I had already done most of the game's miscellaneous trophy and had about 25 quests finished. It was time to start Kasane's playthrough. Upon starting up your new game EX, which carries over gifts given, levels, items, equipments, quests, both accepted and in progress, challenge progress, and so on, it practically takes over everything except for bond levels in the bond episodes, which makes the game a breeze for a second playthrough. Upon completing the prologue again, you will get a new trophy. The next trophy I got is one that is known to plague the community. It seems to be partially glitchy, and that trophy is the secret trophy, Protect. You get this by looking at the poster in the gym of the hideout. It's the 2 posters next to each other with a Rashi on them. I could not get the trophy to be obtained as Yuito, and it took me about 10 minutes of trying it with Kasane before it worked. I don't know if you have to stand in a particular place or be right up next to the photo. The posters will be earned very early once Arashi is a member of your team, which in Kasane's route, it will be around Standby Phase 5, I believe. Maybe Standby Phase 6. Whereas with Yuito, you won't get this trophy until Standby Phase 9 after the teams merge. Now, as you just heard, I'd probably get this trophy around Standby Phase 5 with Kasane. That means the next trophy you're going to get is going to be for a way off in the story. The next trophy you will get is Suppressor of all enemies. This is for beating all enemy types in the game. Both Yuito and Kasane have bosses that are unique to their own routes. So, as a result of this, you'll get this trophy after beating the boss of Phase 9, just before the teams merge. If you're doing Yuito first and Kasane second, like I did. Next trophy I got was Link Expert, which can also only be gotten when all members are at least level 3 in their bond. As Yuito and Kasane, you must use all 9 combo visions each. So you'll have to do all 18 of the combo attacks. Therefore, this can only be gotten on your second playthrough when the second protagonist and their combo attack is allowed to be used. So the earliest you can possibly get this trophy is Phase 9, Standby Phase on the second playthrough. The next batch of trophies will be earned pretty consecutively across your Standby Phases 11 and 12 for seeing the final bond events with all party members during the second playthrough. This will earn you 8 trophies total for your party members. This will also be when you can earn the trophy Gift Giving Freak for giving all members their unique gifts. Both protagonists have a unique gift list to complete from the exchange shop, and there's a unique gift from the protagonist for reaching bond level 6 with at least 1 member each. Second last trophy you're going to obtain is Red Strings for 2, which is from seeing the ending as the second protagonist. At this point, there is one more trophy to get before the Platinum, and it's the only other trophy that you will probably not get naturally from just playing the game. It's from maxing out your skill tree, which can be achieved at level 80 for either character, Yuito or Kasane. At this point, during the second playthrough, I was cognizant of the very slow level ups after I hit about level 62. You can compensate this with challenge rewards, but it still won't be enough. You don't need to reach level 99, only level 80. And the best place to grind is only unlocked right after the second ending. Make sure you have several brain field gear items for ease. You're going to go to the hideout, you hit square by the floating TV. You go to the SP mission in the menu. You will fight against Jewel Pods, a rare enemy type that is hard to kill normally, but if you succeed in defeating them, you will be rewarded a stupid large amount of EXP and kilns. Once you load in the mission, you're going to need to use the brain field gear immediately and immediately enter the brain field. The easiest way to defeat these enemies is by using R2 attack to launch objects at the enemies. To normally defeat these enemies, you will need to use teleportation or hypervelocity, but even then it felt like it was a toss-up beating these enemies. Hypervelocity never seemed to last long enough, and the teleportation always seemed to fall short because of the enemy movement. Once you're able to get up to level 80, immediately enter your menu, unlock the remaining points of your skill tree in the brain map, and you will get the final trophy and the platinum trophy. Alright, if you stuck with me this far, it's time for my thoughts on the game, along with the coveted Dan the Ranking Man rating. Overall, this game was fun. It didn't overwhelm me with a bunch of different combos and complicated game systems. The story was interesting, and it kept me intrigued and guessing. The game even managed to subvert some of my expectations. For example, I initially thought that the handler for Team Yuito was going to betray us towards the end of the game, and instead of betraying us, he ended up being an incredibly pivotal member for the story. So I was pleasantly surprised with that aspect. However, the game seems to have been made with Yuito in mind throughout the whole experience, with Kasane being secondary. The characters all had very strong ties to Yuito. So let's take a look at each of the teams, their member, their composition, and their chemistry with one another. Yuito team consists of Luca, Hanabi, Sugumi, Gemma, and Wataru the Handler. Hanabi is Yuito's childhood friend, and she has a crush on him. Gemma is an older OSF member who gains respect for Yuito through the convictions they share and views Yuito almost as a nephew of sorts. Sugumi is able to be friends with Yuito easily, and they each boost each other, especially with Sugumi being nervous about her clairvoyance and overstepping by accident. Luca has the most in common with Yuito, as both of them were originally duds, people born without powers, also known as inepts. Luca has an inferiority complex not only due to his small size, but also because as a dud, or being part of the 0.1% of the population that's considered inept, is always afraid of losing his power. Finally, even though you can't bond with Wataru, because he's just a set piece, Wataru is still pivotal in as several of the Bond episodes. He readily provides information, is incredibly competent, and was a major factor in the story by being able to fully record a conversation that exposes the government's ill intentions, manipulations, machinations, and sway public opinion. Now, let's look at Kasane's team from Yuito's perspective. These members are going to be Kasane, Shiden, Kagero, Kyoka, Arashi, and Haruka. Kasane is revealed to be the OSF agent that saved Yuito as a child, is the only one truly compatible with Yuito's manufactured powers, is the only one future Yuito could trust to end the coming disaster in the story, and was initially thought to have been the one of the killer of She was initially thought to have been the killer of Yuito's father. Kagero is the assassin who actually killed Yuito's father, and was also thought to be the one most suited to taking Yuito out if Team Kasane truly decided to do so. Kyoka, a Togetsu spy who was monitoring Yuito since birth to keep an eye on two users of the Red Streams, people with the power to rewrite history, and has come to terms with seeing her quasi-nephew being raised while being manipulated and experimented on. Shiden sees Yuito as a rival, as well as someone who should be beneath Shiden, but somehow isn't. Shiden views Yuito as having everything, being born into a rich and powerful family, and feels slighted that despite being an OSF volunteer, as opposed to a scout who was forced into the regiments due to their naturally occurring great psionic gifts like Shiden was, Yuito was assigned to Seto platoon, Captain Seto being Shiden's idol. This attitude leads to a fairly intense rivalry between Yuito and Shiden, and ends beautifully with Shiden accepting their differences, and realizes that due to each of them pursuing different ideals, they will grow out of being rivals. Arashi is one of the few that really doesn't have much chemistry with Yuito. Their relationship basically boils down to she can abuse him into doing more work for her, but because Yuito is so considerate, Yuiko can also directly protect her older brother in times of need. The only really odd member is Haruka, as she really doesn't do much of it all in her own storyline, let alone in Yuito's. If we look at the characters from Kasane's perspective, the character ideas are much shallower in comparison. Arashi sees Kasane as another doting sibling, not much else. Kagero may see Kasane as a surrogate for his wife or daughter, although Kagero views Sugumi as much more of a surrogate for his daughter. But he also mainly uses Kasane as a shield to hide the fact that he murdered Yuito's dad. Kyoka is meant to be a spy watching over Kasane, but Kyoka definitely has a lot more chemistry with Yuito. She also has more history. Go figure. Shiden also has a rivalry with Kasane, but he doesn't have nearly as interesting as a payoff as with Yuito. Hanabi is able to confide in Kasane about her crush on Yuito, and Kasane can partially relate because her own sister Naomi had a crush on Yuito as well. But that's about it. Sugumi becomes Kasane's friend, but Kasane really doesn't care too much or know how to be a friend, as expressed in the final Bond episode. Luca becomes obligated to confess that he's a dud to Kasane, and Kasane really doesn't know how to relate to that or work well with Luca. Gemma, despite only having 4 Bond episodes, is one of the few that actually has a deeper connection with Kasane, as he was very close to Kasane's sister Naomi. So that relationship was really one of the only good payoffs during Kasane's route. Haruka is barely involved in anything, as she is Team Kasane's handler, and she doesn't seem to be nearly as competent as Wataru. Haruka's sole contribution is notifying the team that the other weapons are being moved. That's it. Haruka is hands down the worst member of the cast. And then finally, comparing Yuito from Kasane's eye, it's complicated. Naomi, Kasane's sister, who was turned into an other as part of the story, started to have a crush on Yuito. So Kasane tries to get closer to Yuito in order to properly vet Yuito to make sure he has no ulterior motives or will take advantage of her sister. Kasane then proceeds to be entrusted to kill Yuito from future Yuito in her storyline, then proceeds to have doubts about killing him, and then comes to understand Yuito's ideals and understand the type of person Yuito is. Put simply, comparing the storylines between the two, majority of the characters have a deeper and less shallow chemistry with Yuito than they do with Kasane. So it really feels like Kasane's story was almost an afterthought, or they wanted to have certain things for Kasane's story to play out, but never really got to fully expand on them. The two remaining cast members to discuss are Nagi and Naomi. Naomi is Kasane's sister. She has a crush on Yuito. Early on in the story, she gets turned into an other, and then later in the story, dies. She doesn't do much and is kind of shallow. That's arguably due to lack of screen time and the fact that she got turned into an other very early on and then was hidden away to be experimented and possibly potentially saved. On the other end of the spectrum, we have Nagi. Nagi is Yuito's best friend, who gets abducted after Naomi is turned into an other. Nagi then undergoes personality readjustment, which is basically just brainwashing. Nagi's brainwashed into attacking Yuito and his friends. Nagi causes the death of the platoon leader, Captain Seto, and is a formidable enemy throughout the game. He's one of the most challenging bosses you will fight, and when he finally dies, even though it was to be a bit expected, his death was still sad and meaningful. Every member of Team Yuito was upset to have lost him. Whereas when Naomi died, it seemed to be more inevitable because she was already an other with no chance of being reverted back to a human. So, not only that, the characters that end up killing Naomi, or at least causing the death, they kind of just disappear from the game. No one really knows what happened to them. I believe their story got expanded a little bit in the DLC, but I've seen conflicting reports on that. So that's just the story beats. Team Yuito also seems to be better at the combat side of the game. So let's follow up the direct comparisons as follows with Team Yuito versus Team Kasane. First up, we got Pyrokinesis versus Electrokinesis. Both of these SAS types increase damage and inflict a status on the enemy. Pyro burns enemies, drastically lowers the crush gauge, and causes damage over time. Electro stuns the enemies when inflicting the status. Some dungeons require electrokinesis to navigate. Pyrokinesis ends up being better due to the higher damage output, reducing the crush gauge more, and there's more enemies that are weak to Pyro versus Electro. So then we have Teleportation versus Hypervelocity. Both of these SAS types increase mobility and allow you to defeat speedy and self-protecting enemies. Teleportation moves your character a set distance, lets you move through obstacles and dungeons, and has a combo starter that drastically reduces the crush gauge. Hypervelocity makes everything else move in slow motion. The gauge drains very quickly, and can be used to bypass certain gates in one single dungeon. These same gates can also be bypassed with invisibility. Teleportation simply works better because not only does it last longer, but the combo starter does more crush damage. The next two abilities to compare is Sclerokinesis versus Invisibility. Both of these SAS alter the player's status and offer protection from enemies. Invisibility, like Hypervelocity, also can be used to get past certain gates in one dungeon. Sclerokinesis works as straight up invincibility. While it's active, attacks will do no damage and no knockback to the player. While active attacks will lower the SAS gauge instead of causing damage, invisibility works by making enemies forget you after a certain time, and lets you use a special charged attack to drastically reduce a single enemy's crush gauge. This charged attack fully depletes the SAS of invisibility. There's no contest here. Being temporarily invincible is so much better. Everything invisibility does can also be accomplished by either teleportation or hypervelocity. Its redundancy during Kasane's campaign is very egregious. Finally, we have the comparison between clairvoyance versus duplication. Both of these are support abilities, altering player abilities. Having clairvoyance available makes enemies that create fog, duplicate, or hide spawn. Clairvoyance is used to determine the original and duplicated enemies and see obscured or invisible enemies. Higher levels of bond with Sugumi will allow for easier shell breaks when active, guarantee item drops at level 6, and from level 1 on increases the window for perfect dodging while SAS Clairvoyance is active. Duplication, on the other end, adds extra attacks to Psychokinesis, helps with breaking shells, and at higher bond levels creates duplicates of the player to deal more damage. Initially, Clairvoyance is more readily helpful, and is mandatory from its introduction until the end of the game, with the 2 final bosses even having its use be 100% required. However, after bond level 4, duplication is busted, increasing the damage dealt, and if used simultaneously with pyrokinesis or electrokinesis, the damage output is insane, simply because duplication makes 1 copy and then at level 6, 2 copies of your player character. Seeing this, overall, it really seems like the developers favored Yuito overall, with 3.5 of the 4 abilities forced upon you and used for the majority of the game being just flat out better than Kasane's, with Kasane's best support ability being unlocked around the same time as the team merger, which is just sad. If you could get duplication earlier, it would be more useful, but you won't be able to get to rank 4 until at least halfway through the game, if not right around the time of the team merger. So it also really doesn't make sense to have hyper velocity and invisibility on the same team, as they basically perform the same function, to move around to the enemy's weak spot to attack them. Hypervelocity simply works better than invisibility too. So if it wasn't for the fact that hypervelocity's gauge went down at an extremely fast rate, it wouldn't be as much of a toss-up. So the game also has some decent and memorable soundtracks that mostly set the mood very well. There's a couple points you'll see in my long plays of it that have what seems like out-of-tone music where people are being serious and it's lighthearted and funny, but that's about it. So, and the voice acting, while it's not the best, is pretty good. Overall, I'd have to give the game a 1.5 out of 10 for ease of trophy hunting, simply being time consuming and the majority of the trophies popping naturally. As for the overall rating, I give it a patented 82 out of 100. The combat is fun, but it sometimes feels cheap, especially with all the enemies with large area of effect attacks that are sometimes difficult or just downright impossible to dodge. This issue is probably why they give you a way to become invincible for a certain time. Kasane also didn't feel as good to play as Yuito, and her storylines weren't nearly as intriguing to me as Yuito's. Yuito's story felt way more cohesive overall. I was more invested in the characters, their arcs, and the overarching story, being anti-government and a lot of fun with the sci-fi stuff. If the game had focused on only doing the Yuito storyline, I think it would have been better overall, especially with how little changed in the scenes between playthroughs, sometimes the only difference being 1 or 2 lines of dialogue, and there's even certain scenes toward the end that, when playing as Kasane, are just skipped. Alright, that's a wrap on Scarlet Nexus. Give it a try before it leaves PS Plus. Tune in next time to see me platinum the next games on the list. Like and subscribe, and remember, only losers play on easy.